Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is episode number 6 of High Street Sports. As you can see on the TV behind me, Ohio State opens the season with a 23-3 victory over the Indiana Hoosiers in Bloomington. Yesterday was just about, what you thought it might have been, maybe in terms of awkwardness and stuff like that. But overall, I think the play calling was, pretty average considering the circumstances and some of the players that were brought back. And um, overall, the game just felt very clunky, especially after that first drive. A lot of momentum, I felt, kind of got slipped away, but we'll get into all that in a second. As I said, Ohio State wins 23-3. We'll look at the offense and defense, both sides of the ball, special teams. We'll talk about next week versus Youngstown State. But Vince, how do you want to start off this conversation by talking about what the Buckeyes did yesterday?
Well, I think overall it was a good win. The best thing about being 1-0 is the chance to go 2-0. So we're here with that. But going forward, I think there's going to be a lot of hard conversations after the film's broken down today, and finding solutions to some of those issues. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good game for a new quarterback, especially during what we could call maybe a quarterback controversy or a quarterback battle. Based on how Kyle played yesterday, I don't see him stepping back from that starting role anytime soon. But let's get right into it and talk about the offense. One of the things that you mentioned was Ryan Day's play calling, and I think this was kind of one of the first things I wanted to talk about here. Do you think he's too conservative at times? And kind of to go into that, they talked about third down. Ryan Day talked about third down after the game, in which they were only 2 for 12. 16.6% on third down. That's not going to win you most FBS games or Big Ten conference games. And then they needed to go for it on fourth down 3 times, and converted 2 of those 3 for 66%. The offensive line did not play as well as you would have wanted them to. Overall pass grade for the offensive line, and these grades are from Pro Football Focus, 88.8% pass block grade and a 56.8 run block grade. No sacks on 4 total pressures. Carson Hinsman shined a little bit there, along with Josh Fryer. And outside of that, no lineman really graded highly in the run game. And then on the right side, those 2 were your best pass blockers, Matthew Jones and Josh Fryer. But going back to the question here, do you think Ryan Day played it too conservative?
I think I don't know exactly what I was expecting from the offense. In the first couple of drives, I don't know if this completely went against what I thought might happen. I think it was very conservative considering that you have a new starter out there and some new offensive line pieces. But outside of that, I do think it was a little bit conservative. I think you got to try and at least get the ball downfield. When you said, the offensive line did much better in pass pro than it did in run blocking. So I think you should have really leaned into that. We did see, some motion with some end around motion and things like that. A lot of under center, which I didn't really hate. But from a certain standpoint, I think when you've got the weapons that you have out there, I don't think there's really much of a need to line up at center as much as they under center as much as they did. I think, when you stand back there in the shotgun and you let Marv and you let Emeka and you let Julian and some of those guys that are burners, use their athleticism and make things happen and get open and make a play. But, for the most part, I don't really hate what I saw out of the offense, but I do hate it for Trey, who and sometimes, when he was running on the left side, especially, really kind of had nowhere to go on that left side when they tried to bounce it out onto the perimeter with Trey, and some of those runs he got bottled up in the backfield. But I think if a couple things, go a different way, obviously with Kyle on that zone read and inside the 5, if he just uses Chip's block and goes around Chip, he walks into the end zone. So that's a mental mistake there. But I mean, I think, there were a few things that could have gone, an inch or two one way or another, and the Buckeyes break off a couple more runs than they did. But I did think it was conservative. I think maybe in the early going, it's kind of warranted, but I think as the game went on, you kind of did see the play calling develop just a little bit, but it was a lot of the same as what you saw in the first half. I think it was a little bit too conservative, but like I said, under the circumstances for the first game of the year, I think it was kind of warranted. So I'll reserve my judgment for a later date there.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a little too conservative. You only had 6 targets for Marvin Harrison Jr. He caught 2 of those for 18 yards. Not great. A couple of other places where Marv had some impact. He had a key pass interference call against Indiana that he drew. And then also the touchdown that was called back. I think that was a huge missed opportunity. And you just got to pay attention to where you are on the field. If he wouldn't have stepped out or got in faster, to give the refs that view that he was actually pushed out, because there was some contact there prior to him going out. Do I think that he necessarily should have gone out there? No, but could he have made the case for that? Absolutely. And I think the 2 plays that you mentioned, or that play, and then the other play you mentioned where Kyle McCord goes left instead of right, with Chip Trainum blocking in front of him. I think that makes this a bit of a different game. You add 14 points on there, and we're looking at a 47-3 victory instead of, or sorry, a 37-3 victory instead of a 23-3 victory. And I think you have Buckeye Nation with a little bit different attitude, especially, you go on Twitter and you see how it sounds like everybody played the worst, and that this team is going to be the worst that we've ever seen. I don't think that's the case at all. There were a few things that do need to get shored up, especially on the offensive line. It's expected when you have 3 of 5 new starters on that line. The disappointing part was, though, Matthew Jones and Donovan Jackson both graded out on the lower end, according to Pro Football Focus, which shows me that, either they weren't ready to start the season, or they might be banged up. They have to be there with that consistency. And I think we'll see less conservative play calling. I thought, in my mind, when we say Ryan Day's too conservative, I thought he was a little too conservative in rotating the quarterbacks in this game too. I feel like Devin Brown could have come in earlier in the game, maybe gotten a spark. He only got 3 snaps in the first half, where maybe he could have brought another element to the game. But we'll hopefully see next week. And with that, especially with Devin Brown versus Kyle McCord here, which I think Kyle McCord played really well for his second true start and first time as the starter. But I feel like Ryan Day's offense right now favors a Kyle McCord over Devin Brown, just because it is more pro style. I feel like at times that Ryan Day is Jim Tressel 2.0. And don't get me wrong, Jim Tressel was a great coach for Ohio State. I think that after the years of Urban Meyer and now into the Ryan Day era, we're used to these explosive offenses. But I feel like Ryan Day is trying to go back to more traditional pro style offense, especially with a young quarterback, because yesterday's play calling seemed really lethargic. Everything seemed really slow. And instead of being quick strike and wanting to get out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably true on a lot of accounts, but I think you got to give Indiana's defense credit. They really did come out and have the idea about them that they weren't just going to roll over and let Ohio State's offense get going like they wanted it to. And the linebacker number 44 for Indiana, whose name escapes me right now, had a hell of a game. I mean, he
Aaron
was
Casey.
yeah, he was in the backfield numerous times, blew up a lot of runs before they could get going, and seemed like he was just everywhere for the Indiana defense yesterday when they needed him. So, I think you got to give Indiana's defense credit. They had a good game plan going in. They executed that game plan, and um, you know, but in I think, when you look at it on the surface and you see what Ohio State has on offense, you look at the score and you're thinking to yourself, especially, like you mentioned, a lot of Buckeye fans on social media yesterday, and the sky is falling. But in reality, a lot of these other teams played garbage opponents in week one and not a conference road game. So, there's no excuses certainly for the miscues that happened on offense yesterday. You would think that some of those things would be cleaned up. But, a 23-3 victory, and, like you said, could have been upwards in the high 30s, low 40s if you take away some of the miscues. But, I think in a sense, it was tough for Ryan to make the move to go to Devin Brown, and I could kind of understand why he didn't. Um, on the surface, that's going to look like a disservice to Devin Brown, and I think that a lot of people will see it that way. But I think when you look at it, a guy that's already had another year in the system, a guy that had led a pretty impressive first drive for Ohio State that it resulted in a Mayan Williams touchdown. But I think it was one of those situations where you can choose to try and get Devin the snaps that you talked about getting him earlier in the week. But from a certain standpoint, it's what the team needed at the time. And I think that Kyle McCord was the guy that was going to lead that game all the way through once you especially saw what the score was at halftime and even into the third quarter. So, that sucks that Devin didn't get in there and get the snaps that, Ryan Day said that he might have on Monday. But I think this week, if it were up to me, I would let Devin start this week. Let him, go out and take the first snaps and play a couple series and see what he can do and see what the offense looks like running through him. Now, obviously, it's going to be a lesser opponent, but reps are reps. And at this point in the season, if Ohio State's trying to truly see what they have at quarterback, they need to see what they can get out of Devin. And I think this week is probably as good a week as any to get him going.
Now, if they start Devin here, is this a Kyle McCord Akron situation where Kyle McCord got that one start CJ Stroud's freshman year because CJ was banged up and then never got a chance after that? Or do you think that this is more of a JJ McCarthy, the quarterback for
Cade McNamara.
Yeah, Cade McNamara situation?
Yeah. I mean, it could be, but when you're trying to figure out quickly what you have and what you don't have and who could be the guy and what direction you want to go, Ryan Day showed that he had a lot of confidence in Kyle McCord, and rightfully so. I mean, he by all accounts played a very good game. And there's something that I'm going to hold here. I want to circle back to a Marvin Harrison point when we get through all this stuff. But there were, just like we said, a few times in the game where the score could have been way different than what it was. So I think Kyle McCord and sticking with Kyle McCord was a pretty good decision. Now, and like I said, that all depends on if Ohio State's truly trying to see what they have at quarterback, because if they are, then you have to get Devin Brown snaps before the Notre Dame game. You cannot go into the Notre Dame game with any second guesses, and you can't rotate the quarterback then. That's way too big of a game. There's too much at stake there to do that. So if you're going to do that and you missed your opportunity last week, you've got 2 weeks to make it happen before you get to South Bend. So I don't necessarily think that it could be that way, but if Ryan Day is showing that Kyle McCord's going to be the guy, then, you need to figure that out sooner rather than later.
No, I totally agree. And I think based on kind of the rotation this week, I was wrong in all of my predictions saying that Devin Brown would be the starter come Notre Dame. I do think based on the small sample size that we've seen with 1 week, that Kyle McCord has the upper hand in being the starter come Notre Dame game. And I think that part of the upside to Kyle McCord here is he can sling it down the field.
Yep.
He had really good deep passes, was really good in play action yesterday as well. I think that play action was probably yes, best passing plays came from play action. He was 66.7% adjusting completion percentage in play action. And his best throws were 20 plus yards downfield. So, he was 20 of 33, 239 yards passing with one interception. The one interception came on the only fourth down that Ohio State did not convert on, and looked like it was just a play where he misread it and threw it to the wrong guy.
Well, Chip got cut pretty good off the line, and if Chip didn't get cut, that's a walk-in touchdown. I mean, that play was wide open. So unfortunately for Kyle, Chip got cut down there and lost his footing, and then Kyle made a panicked read and threw it to the wrong person. Which that mental lapse there, which the play broke down and Kyle, was rolling and did what he felt was the right move. But I think in that situation, you got to just try to run the ball and see, you got to take care of the ball. But that was an unfortunate situation there. I want to talk about Marvin Harrison just real quick before, we get too far down the line. I don't know if it was frustration. There were definitely a couple times where it seemed like Marv kind of took a play off. There was a run block that I saw definitely that he kind of just walked off the line.
It was down near the end zone in a goal line formation. He was the only wide receiver to the bottom of your screen.
Yep.
And I believe it was on Mayan's first touchdown run, actually. If you watch it, if I remember what play you're talking about.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the play earlier where he got forced out of bounds, whether it was a soft push or what. I mean, you got to make an effort to get back in bounds, and you got to know where you're at on the field. And I don't want to get on and say, just right off the bat that effort was an issue yesterday. But for Ohio State, if you're going to get to where you want to go, your best players, namely Marvin Harrison Jr., are going to have to play balls out every single play. And it didn't seem like that happened. There wasn't much of a complete game put together by everybody on the field yesterday. And, the changes are one thing, but effort can't be an issue. And sometimes there were some plays out there that kind of looked like it was an issue, which I'm sure Ohio State's going to clean that up as they watch film this week. But that needs to be made a point, and Ohio State's best players need to play their best at all times.
Yeah, I think that Marv was having just an off day. I think it kind of started with, a little bit slow in the first half, couldn't get into the game. And then he had that injury where he kind of fell awkward on his elbow at the end of the first half. I think that had some effect on it as well. Not saying that he's banged up or he's hurt, but I think that, that kind of can sometimes take you mentally out of the game where you're like, man, I don't want to get hurt against Indiana. Like, this is the first game of my most likely ultimate last season at Ohio State. So why keep pushing so hard and get hurt when you may not need where you're not needed? But the 2 receptions for 18 yards was not what you want to get your Biletnikoff campaign out the gate. And I say Biletnikoff because I truly don't believe that a receiver has as much of a chance to win the Heisman as a quarterback or really a quarterback. I think you're going to see a quarterback win it this year, whether it's Travis. Oh, shoot. What's his name? The quarterback from Florida State.
I'm blanking.
Yeah, I'm blanking too. Caleb Williams, or maybe one of the Ohio State quarterbacks as well, or whomever establishes themselves in Alabama or Georgia. I think those are going to be your leading candidates for Heisman there. But I think that Marv can do that if he can battle back from this subpar performance and make more impacts in the game going forward. It was also nice, speaking of wide receivers, to see both Xavier Johnson and
Hmm.
Emeka Ibuka back returning kicks,
Hmm.
kicks and punts, because let's be honest here. We need playmakers back there. They're returning punts and kicks, because we haven't had that in how long?
If I may, I was looking and watching Emeka receive those punts yesterday, and there were two or three that I felt that he looked really comfortable and kind of had his vision of what he wanted to do and where he wanted to go, and then got tripped up, and whatever the case was. Emeka will take one back to the house this year. I could tell by the way he was, by the confidence that he showed back there yesterday. I think Emeka is definitely going to take one back to the house this year, provided there's no block in the back or silly nonsense that comes with it. But I thought Emeka looked good back there, and Xavier too on the one that he took out from about the goal line on that kickoff return. I mean, he's a dynamic athlete. So he deserves to be back there.
Absolutely. Didn't see much from Xavier Johnson as far as plays on the field outside of special teams situations, but he
Yeah.
seemed to play pretty well on special teams, which really just kind of speaks to a guy who's going to bring depth to the wide receiver position as
Mhm.
we get later into the season. We know that he's trusted by both Ryan Day and um, Brian Hartline, because of some of those key moments he had last season. In key games, he played really well against Georgia, had a key touchdown against Notre Dame to help win it. So I think we'll see more Xavier Johnson as the season goes on. But obviously, he did not have a huge impact against Indiana. Switching kind of positions here, from wide receiver to running back, I wanted to kind of hit on Chip Trainum. I
Mhm.
think he was probably my biggest surprise yesterday. He had 8 rush attempts for 57 yards. He led all running backs for Ohio State with 5.63 yards after contact average.
Mhm.
So he's getting hit and running 5 more yards before he's going down to the ground. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Mayan was second with 2 yards. And Travion was, I believe, 1 yard. Not very good from Travion after, but he had some good cuts towards the end. I thought there was a couple of times where he looked tentative in holes, Travion that is, and would get up to a hole, chop his feet instead of exploding through it or finding that alley. But I think those are things that can be worked on. And after the game, Ryan Day did say that Trey will be the starter, and the combo of Chip and Chop will be backing up and rotating in. One thing I did not expect from Chip Trainum was that he kind of played a hybrid role.
Mhm.
Anytime they were in a I formation or had a fullback role on the field, Chip Trainum played that role. He was key on both of Mayan Williams's touchdowns. He had the lead block on Chop's first touchdown, and then sealed the lane on the second touchdown. So, really, really good effort there by Chip Trainum. I think that was one of those where you're like, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know about you, but I certainly was not.
No, I mean, I wasn't necessarily expecting it, but can I say that I'm surprised after what we saw down the stretch from him last year? Absolutely not. Chip is kind of proven to be a guy that's going to go out there and do absolutely whatever it takes for the team in order to win, and he did that yesterday. And that was one of those things where you mentioned that Travion looked a little tentative. I'm gonna stick up for Trey here. Trey was eating a bowl of shit soup half the time when he bounced the when any call run to the left was there, that left side of the line collapsed and Trey was getting hit 2 yards in the backfield. So
No,
there
I'm
wasn't
with you on that. They
yeah,
definitely were
Trey didn't
getting beat up on those stretch boundary runs for sure.
yeah, Trey didn't there were probably I can think of 3 to 4 runs off the top of my head where as soon as that ball got handed from Kyle to Trey, I mean there was somebody in Trey's lap. So you do want to see that number improve, obviously, but I think with Trey, his line's got to do him, some justice there in order to let him get to the line of scrimmage. So, but yeah, I mean, no, Chip was incredible. I thought Chip was, you know, it's seamless to me, man. Like you go from Trey to Chop to Chip, and it's seamless, which is good for Ohio State, man. There's a lot of depth at that position, and when you look at it, you had Chip with 57 yards, Trey with 47, mine with 25, and the 2 tuds. So, it was a solid day out of that room for sure. I think that unit as a whole probably played the best out of anybody on offense. Which I think I said it, and it's been alluded to on the show a couple times. The run game is going to have to be what establishes the game for Ohio State in the early going. And I thought they did a really good job of being that safety blanket yesterday. And they did exactly what was needed out of them throughout the game. And another one, a play that stuck out from the running backs to me was late in the game where it set up the last field goal for Ohio State when Kyle threw that wheel route to it was a perfectly placed ball to Mayan, that little wheel route, which I thought was one of the better executed plays and one of the better balls of the game from Kyle McCord. So like I said, the running backs did a very good job of being there for the offense when they needed it, and they ultimately propelled the offense to those scores that they got. So a pleasant surprise, we'll call Chip Trainum.
Yeah, absolutely. And that throw from Kyle McCord to
it was beautiful.
It was right in the breadbasket, just right there over his head, perfect on the wheel route. Defender was behind him. It was what you want to see from that type of play. And I want to see more of that from Kyle McCord.
Yeah.
I thought he shined when he had time to throw the ball down the field and read his coverage. He looked pretty good doing that. And I don't have a lot of stats to back that up. But the eye test shows me that is the case. And another guy that really surprised me was G. Scott Jr.
I agree.
He had some really good plays there. He 60% of his 25 snaps were blocking, and did a decent job blocking there, but also had some good receptions. He had one reception for 10 yards on that 4th down conversion into the flat. That was beautiful, a beautiful play. And I think that really kind of showed that, hey, G. Scott's really taken that next step. It's kind of disappointing that it took him till his senior year to make that step, but I'm excited to see what we can from G. Scott. I think this tight end room is truly 3 deep. Joe Royer got in there. He had 1 target, no receptions, but played quite a few snaps. Had a good game. So I think that's the case. And then Cade Stover, man.
Just a monster.
Yeah, led the team in receiving, 5 receptions for 98 yards, had 7 targets. His long of 49 down the seam was a beautiful play.
Yep.
I believe that was in the 3rd quarter, set up a touchdown. Actually, that set up Mayan's 2nd touchdown, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And man, he had a really good receiving game. His run blocking, not so great. He graded out at 58.8. But I think that was just kind of how everybody was yesterday as far as blocking. O-line could have been a little better. Tight ends could have blocked a little better as well. But I think Cade Stover, man, he's going to be a problem this season.
I agree. No, it's that play that you mentioned, that long 49-yard strike which was a beautiful ball by Kyle McCord as well. It just you could see when Cade got up how fired up he was, and he is the leader, and he's got the fire that Ohio State's offense is going to need, and I see him being somebody Ohio State leans on for the length of the season. But yeah, Cade looked healthy. He looked good receiving the ball. Like you said, some some room to work on in the run block. But that seemed to be a team wide issue yesterday. So that'll be something that they'll have to hit hard and practice and clean up, before we get to South Bend. But no, I agree with you on the tight end thing. I think G Scott was, he played as well as I can remember him playing, in an Ohio State uniform. So it's good to see him out there and comfortable. And it does look like Joe Royer was now the tight end number 3, which is kind of shocking. But G's a guy that's been here for a long time, and if he can show what he showed, yesterday all season, then I don't have a problem with that order.
No, I don't either. And I think Joe Royer may be the third guy in, but I don't think he's the number 3 guy on the depth chart. I really think that you
Right.
have a 1 and a 2A and 2B with
Mhm.
G Scott Jr. and Joe Royer. I think G Scott brings the experience that you're looking for, and I think Joe Royer brings some of that athleticism. Don't get me wrong, though. G Scott's an athletic dude.
Mhm.
It just for some history there, right? He came in as a wide receiver to Ohio State, crowded room. I believe he came in with Olave and Garrett Wilson,
Mhm.
and it was loaded at that time. So I don't blame him for moving to tight end,
Mhm.
and has been pretty well there. He has. He's played pretty well over his time there. He's had a few mistakes, but you know, do it is a good solid contributor and will continue to be. And one last thing on offense here before we transition to talking about the Silver Bullets and
Mhm. Mhm.
asking the question, are they
Mhm.
back?
Mhm.
So while you
Mhm.
think about that,
Mhm. I
let's
think I have an
talk
answer.
about Ryan Day. Let's circle back here to Ryan Day's play calling. I have a theory here that Ryan Day bet the under and against the spread. And that is why the offense looked so sluggish and play calling was so conservative. I think that Ryan Day is just out here messing with all of the sports media, all of the fans, and all of college football, saying, "Hey, I got a good team, but I'm just going to go back here. I'm gonna go make my cheddar and move on to the next one, being Youngstown State." What do you think about that?
I that's a hasty accusation. No,
Allegedly.
allegedly. No, we're in no way insinuating that Coach Day is doing anything illegal in that respect. No, that is funny though. I can see where that's coming from.
Absolutely. So that brings me to the defense, right? Jim
Mhm.
Knowles, he's making $2 million a year, and we're looking for an improvement in year 2 under Jim Knowles. Would you say after this performance that the Bullets are back?
It's too early to tell. However, I really, really liked what I saw out of Ohio State's defense yesterday. We talked at length, and everybody's talked at length about how this defense this year is going to hinge upon how much quarterback pressure they can get on the defensive line. And I think, by and large, Ohio State's defensive line played lights out yesterday. I mean, JT Tuimoloau, I wouldn't say lights out maybe, but they played very well, and they let the corners and the secondary get out there and really flex their muscles a little bit. Denzel Burke looked pretty good. Um, I I was very um, disappointed with Davis and Igbenogson a couple times yesterday. That play, the second play of the game, is inexcusable and cannot happen. You cannot put yourself in the situation to get thrown out of the game when they call targeting the way that they have over the last couple of years. You cannot put yourself in that situation to be tossed out of the game that early on. That was a bonehead play. Um, I think, I don't know what exactly was going through his mind there, but that can't happen again. And then there was another play in the game that I can't remember
You talking about
exactly.
his pass interference there where he got a little handsy, but
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
mind, I don't think it was too much I don't think it was a pass interference. I think when you look at where Davison came from in the SEC. He came from Ole Miss. That type of coverage is pretty standard in the SEC and doesn't get
Correct.
called a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's some that in the Big Ten, yeah, you're going to get called for that for sure,
Mhm.
and you definitely don't want to. You don't want to do that. But going back to the D line here, I actually thought overall they were solid, especially in the run game, really well. Only gave up 71 yards in the run game and a 2.2 yards per carry. So that's
Mhm.
pretty elite. It's pretty hard to do that in in college football today. You only had one sack, and it was late in the fourth quarter by Hero Canoe.
Mhm.
So good news there. Young guys stepping up, making plays. But there were a total of 11 pressures on 19 pass attempts, which when you only get one sack out of those 11 pressures, that's not that great. That's less than 10% sack rate on your to your pressures. So
Mhm.
not really looking that great. Um, Although Mike Hall had a really good game, I thought he was the highest graded pass rusher at 74.7. He had one hurry and one hit, no sacks, but had a really, really solid game. I thought Jack and JT both had moments where they flashed, but I think overall consistency was what was missing there from the
Mhm.
from the defensive line.
Now, granted, I think some of this we have to take with a grain of salt because I don't know if anyone, including myself, uh, anticipated Indiana to come out and run a triple option for much of that game, which I found to be pretty interesting. Good on their part. I mean, like I said, Indiana was well coached on the defensive side of the ball. And for the most part, I mean, obviously they don't have nearly the athletes that Ohio State has on offense. But for the most part, I mean, they kept Ohio State's defense off balance a lot with that triple option early, and
Mhm.
it took Ohio State a little bit to kind of adjust to that. But once they did, they did a really good job of stopping it. Like you said, I think uh, the D line was good. I won't say they were great. The D line was pretty good. The middle of the defensive line was better than the ends. Like you said, JT and Jack flashed, but you want to see, and there were a few that got close to getting a sack, but obviously you got to finish those plays and whatnot. But I think the defensive line and the linebackers did what they had to do to let Ohio State's corners and safeties play as well as they did. And I liked what I saw out of Denzel Burke. I liked, for the most part, what I saw out of Jordan Hancock. Like I said, Davison Igbinosun was solid. He had 4 tackles, and it was a pretty good debut for Davison. But those mental lapses that he had for a couple of those times, man, you really got to clean up. But overall, I think the defense, obviously held a Big Ten opponent on the road to 3 points, and I can't remember who it was, but they said the goal is 0. And but for what it's worth, and for the tricks that Indiana tried to throw out at them, I thought the defense was pretty good in the first game.
Yeah, and I think one guy that we haven't really talked about too much that I saw make a few plays and I thought he did pretty well was Mitchell Melton.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a ton of snaps, but his pass rush, he had 4 pass rushes and got home on 3 of those for pressures. And he was kind of playing that hybrid, I think, Leo, Jack, whatever we call it these days,
Mm-hmm.
more of a stand-up defensive end. Um, and and I was pleasantly surprised. So when we'll see how that evolves throughout the season. And really, I think that the defense is going to evolve throughout the season. I think
Absolutely.
you're very right there with the triple option. It kind of brings your pass rushers back a little bit because they're being a little tentative to the option and making sure that they're closing off their lanes there. So I think that might have had a little bit to do with it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
granted, Indiana only had 19 dropbacks, traditional dropbacks for passes. So it's not like they were throwing the ball 30 times and Ohio State just couldn't get anything home. No, they had pressures, but they just could not. They had 2 quarterback hits, 1 sack, and 8 hurries for those 11 pressures. So not terrible, but not great. One guy that did stand out though, away from the defensive line, and I was really surprised to see that he started, was Josh Proctor. He came
Mm-hmm.
in, he was started to hit like we had seen a couple of years back before his leg injury. There were a few moments where he had some bad angles. There was one on an option play where he went too far down to get the quarterback, where he should have been out with the running back and gave the running back another 2 or 3, 4 yards. And those are that's something you have to take a look at and make sure that, you shore that up. But he had 4 tackles, 1 for loss, and his only passing target, he had a pass breakup.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 3 in the game. 1 came from Josh Proctor, and then the other 2 came from Denzel Burke. So overall, I thought the secondary played really well, especially when you had all 3 corners on the field of Davison Igbinosun, Denzel Burke, and Jordan Hancock. Jordan Hancock did not really hit the stat sheet very much, but I thought he played pretty well. Did not give up a lot in the pass game, which is really where you care. He only had one target against him, and did not give up that play. So pretty solid there. Jordan Hancock only had 17 snaps though, so
Yeah.
it's not like it was a huge sample size.
Well, Indiana, and with that triple option, I mean, there's a lot of people, and it was very apparent to me. The clock stoppage rule after a first down, man, Indiana they used that to their advantage. And credit, I mean, like I said, they wanted to shorten the game. They wanted to limit Ohio State's snaps. And by running that triple option and using the clock to their advantage the way they did, I think that, that played a big part in kind of, throwing a different wrinkle at Ohio State. So, like I said before, Indiana had a pretty good approach to this game. But, this is all good things for Ohio State to go through in the early going, especially after week 1. I think there's a lot of valuable film from the defensive side of the ball that Ohio State can use going forward to really capitalize on the players that they have on the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're going to have to watch out for this season too is how deep that defensive line is. It seems like you could probably go 4 or 5 deep at the ends and probably 5, maybe 6 deep in the tackles. I saw a lot of Jaden McKenzie, a lot of Ty Hamilton,
who
Mike
Jaden
Hall.
McKenzie played well, I thought, when he got in the game as well.
He did. He had he was actually the highest graded defender by Pro Football Focus at 74.7. And I thought he got some good pressures. He had that one good play where Caden Curry set him up. They ran a little twist. Jaden McKenzie went outside, Caden Curry inside, and Caden Curry pushed the quarterback out to him. I thought that was really, really nice play. He did a really good job of sealing the edge. Ty Hamilton, also another guy who graded out really high, 72.4 from Pro Football Focus. So really good numbers there. Who else do you think that we haven't talked about was an impact player yesterday?
Well, you mentioned him in that play that you were just talking about with Jaden McKenzie. I thought Caden Curry. I mean, he had I think a nice play on special teams, and then he played really, really well. I thought when he got into the game at defensive line too. I think Caden Curry is a dog, and you could see that out of him. I mean, he's a guy that has a little bit of the same. I might take your helmet off and get after it as a Cade Stover does. but I love the energy that Caden Curry brings when he's on the field. And you could tell in a big thing that I really did enjoy yesterday was how fired up Ohio State's defense was for everybody when they made a play. That's one thing that stuck out to me. Like, Caden was fired up for Jaden when he made that play. And
Yeah, he was. He
yeah,
was fired up before Jaden even made the tackle. He's just out there like,
yeah. Yeah,
ah!
yeah, yeah. So I thought Caden Curry was a really nice surprise. I thought Josh Proctor, to your point, had a really good first half. His snaps decreased a lot in the second half, I believe, especially in the early part of the third quarter. But he had some really good plays. He blew up that play in the backfield on the first play of the game. Made a couple other really good tackles for Ohio State, but it's like, for every 3 or 4 good plays you get out of him, you get a stinker. And it just, I don't really know what that case is, but I did think Josh played well. I think Caden Curry played well. Really, really happy for Hero Canoe to get in there and get that sack. And then, Sonny Styles, I think was around the ball at all times. He was a guy that was, if he didn't make a play in the backfield, he was there. You saw him standing there. And Lathan Ransom, I thought, had a pretty good game too. So the guys that you want to see have the impact for Ohio State and be the players that they're going to need to be, throughout the season, I thought all played relatively well on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Sonny Styles was the one who stood out for me. It seemed like he was everywhere on that field.
Yep.
No matter if he was on the boundary side, he was getting to the strong side to make the tackle. He had 4 tackles, 1.5 for loss. So, he was in there making plays. I don't believe he had any miss. Oh, he did have 1 missed tackle. So, you got to clean that up. Team missed tackles were really, really low for a first game.
Mm-hmm.
Only 5 missed tackles, which you love to see. That shows that there's been an emphasis on that. But Sonny Styles, man, he's going to be really, really, really good throughout this season, and I really want to see him shine as one of those impact players. Yeah. No turnovers forced yesterday. Ohio State had the only turnover of the game. Do you think this year will improve for the defense in creating turnovers?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it comes from the depth that's there. There's just, you saw yesterday a little bit of it, how many guys can go in there and play for Ohio State. And it didn't seem yesterday like when there were subs made, like it did last year. I think there was a sizable drop off in some of the positions at the 1s versus 2s on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the defensive line. And then in the cornerback position, just how hurt it was. It's hard anywhere when you have as many injuries as there were last year, and just dumb luck things that happen, to keep up the level of play from the 1s and the 2s. I think yesterday you really saw the depth that Ohio State has at defensive line, linebacker, and really every level of the defense. So I think, like we talked about, the triple option really screwed things up for Ohio State as far as the flow of the game went on defense. So I think when you get, to play a team that's going to stand back there and throw the ball, the athletes out there are going to be able to make plays. And just like you said, Sonny Styles was as advertised. That dude looks different. He, plays different. He's him. And that's all there needs to be said about that. And, I think, yes, the turnovers will come. It's just going to, just like the offense is feeling it out, the defense is kind of feeling it out for the new players that they have back there. So, yeah, absolutely. I think Ohio State will get that fixed, and I think there will be more turnovers coming.
Yeah, and what do you think are the keys here to the Bullets, to officially saying the Bullets are back?
Consistency. It starts and stops with consistency. And like you mentioned, with the 11 total pressures on 19 pass attempts, it's consistency, and it's getting home, and it's making the tackle, it's getting back there to the quarterback, and taking a good angle to make the play and get a tackle for a loss or get a sack. And It's that kind of stuff that's going to matter. And once you can get consistent pressure, like we've always said, the corners and safeties will be able to go out there and play aggressive and, use their athleticism to go make a play on the ball. And, I think it starts and stops with consistency, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and in my mind, I think you have to shore up that pass rush. Once that pass rush starts to get consistent pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and consistently getting home, meaning
Yeah.
is when they convert those pressures into hits and
Mm-hmm.
sacks, then I think you're going to see a lot more consistent defense and more dominant defense.
Yeah.
I thought the defense was pretty dominant in itself. We really didn't talk about Denzel Burke, but I thought he was pretty dominant in coverage
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. 2 passes defended. He had 5 total targets, only gave up 1 reception for 24 yards, and that was to wide receivers, Indiana's probably best wide receiver in Cam Camper. But overall, 20% of the targets that went Denzel Burke's way were caught, and only gave up a total of 24 yards. His passer rating against was 47.1. So I think if you continue to see improvement there from Denzel Burke and defensive line with that, I think you're going to see a really, really dominant defense, because one group we really have not talked about today at all on the defense is the linebackers. And
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, our guys really played well back there. Steel
Mm-hmm.
Chambers led the team in tackles, and Tommy Eichenberg had a fairly good game. I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was pretty on brand for Tommy Eichenberg. And I think it's odd to not talk too much about them, but at the same time, they were there. They were the consistent ones within that defense. So transitioning to another area that's not been so consistent, special teams.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because I have some opinions.
Yeah, I thought kick and punt coverage, there were times like the one you were talking about where Caden Curry got downfield, helped make a really, really nice tackle. But then other times it looked really pedestrian. Now, don't get me wrong, the Indiana returner was really good, had a couple of touchdowns last year, but consistency is not there. Kicking game, though, I felt like it met expectations. Fielding was 3 for 3, long of 40. Jesse Mirko had 4 punts for a 45.8-yard average, and a long of 56 yards. So I thought at least that part was good. Jim Tressel was probably sitting at home very happy, seeing that the punt game was doing all right and doing its job to flip the field. But the kick and punt coverage has to get better.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a guy who, at this point in his Ohio State career, there are 0 excuses for some of the bonehead, downright dumb plays that he makes on special teams. If I see Josh Proctor go out there one more time and blow up one of his own dudes making a flailing attempt at a tackle, I'm going to lose my mind. That dude I could not wrap my head around how well he played in the first couple series on defense, but how abysmal he was on kick return and punt coverage. I mean, it was horrible. And that continues to be an area that is struggling for Ohio State. And you cannot, once you get into the meat of the schedule and play the teams that we're going to play, what's going to happen if we give Notre Dame multiple chances to start the ball at the 46-yard line, it's going to end up in a lot of points, and it's going to end up in a situation where Ohio State, it's going to very negatively affect Ohio State once they start playing the better teams on the schedule. And kick coverage, punt coverage it's something that has to change now. It was awful. It's been awful, and it needs to change.
Yeah, I think Parker Fleming needs to go into the room this week and just preach, hey guys, stay in your lanes, make sure that you are staying on your responsibilities. and getting downfield quickly, because I feel like there's too many times where guys are out of position, not staying in their lane, trying to go straight to the ball rather than, staying in their lane to keep any of those cutbacks stopped at the beginning. So yes, I'm with you there. Kick and punt coverage has to improve a lot,
It
and
can't
really,
continue to be a liability. It cannot.
no, it can't, especially when you have a special teams coach on the roster as a dedicated special teams coach. Because thinking about it, right? If Ohio State didn't have a dedicated special teams coach, that would free up a guy like James Laurinaitis to be a full-time coach rather than a GA,
Mhm.
to where he can be coaching the linebackers full time, instead of having a role that's not necessarily the coach. And not, that's not to disparage Parker Fleming. I think that he is a pretty good special teams coordinator. I think that they just need to work on the consistency and discipline. I think that that's one of the big things that I saw, is that there's just not a lot of discipline in staying in your lane and getting down there on those kick and punt coverages.
Well, the difference in, I think, what you got to do, and you got to kind of get over it. If you're worried about throwing guys out there that are your best athletes, and you're worried about them getting hurt, then that's one thing. And Ohio State has had a bad history with injuries in the last couple of years. But one thing about Urban's teams at Ohio State was he had the best athletes on the field on those kick coverages, and
Mhm.
it boded well. Paris Campbell was not afraid to go down there and put a hat on somebody.
Terry
Johnny
McLaurin too.
Dixon, Terry McLaurin, all of those guys were special teams aces. And when you've got a deep receiver room like you got, throw those dudes out there and let them go just make a play. It can't be that hard. I rephrase that. It is that hard, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but you've got to put the guys out there that are going to be willing to go run their face into somebody and make a play, because there's bad form tackling on special teams. There's a lot of arm tackles. There's a lot of people going out there wanting to lay the boom, and fundamentally you need to just go make the tackle, because like I said, field position is important, and once you start playing the meat of the schedule, that cannot be a liability like it has the last couple of years. It just can't.
Speaking of special teams tackling, Jesse Mirko almost decapitated
Mm-hmm. Pat McAfee
Indiana
style.
returner. He kind of said, "All right, I'm just going to go for the headlock here instead of actually tackling," and took him to the sideline there.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if the guy's head was going to pop off or not. I think, if you get to that point and you're the punter and trying to make a play. I'm sure Pat McAfee would be happy to see that. But
For the brand, shout out.
yeah, 100% for the brand. But I'm not sure that a headlock tackle is the best form there.
Yeah, well, McAfee's a WWE guy, so we'll let it slide.
Yeah, well, maybe McAfee taught him that. Who knows?
Big if true.
Fair enough. All right, and moving on to next week. Actually, hold on. Before we do that, did you have any last words on special teams?
No, yesterday it stunk other than the kicking game. So other than that, I mean, the only two that should be proud of themselves on, well, the only three that should be proud of themselves on special teams are Jesse Mirko, fielding, and Caden Curry for going down there and making that play. Otherwise, it needs work.
What about the long snapper?
No, he was good too.
Okay, I was going to
Yeah,
say
he
I
was good
didn't
too.
see any
He was
bad
good too.
snaps from the long snapper.
No,
you
no.
gotta give them their flowers.
Oh, 100%.
Who talks about the long snapper ever?
Listen, nobody loves the specs more than we do. So let's just put that out there. This show is for the brand. We respect special teams. We respect the specialists, and that just is what it is.
Moving right along to next week's opponent, Youngstown State Penguins. Jim Tressel is coming back to haunt us. Although I don't believe he is the president there any longer. But we've got where the school that made him famous coming in to, and actually I lied to you. Oh no, he's a university ambassador for Youngstown State, no longer the president of Youngstown State. He actually left office on February 1st of this year. So no longer Youngstown State Penguin Jim Tressel. I think he's back to being a Buckeye. Not 100% sure. I think maybe this week's game might help determine that. What do you think?
No, it's always good. Hopefully the senator makes an appearance at Ohio Stadium. I can't think that he wouldn't this week. But no, it's always good to see Coach when he's around the horseshoe.
Should we let him dot the I?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right. So Youngstown State, they played Valparaiso this week. They won 52-10 in an FCS matchup. They're both FCS teams, so you can't really read too much into it. They looked like a pretty good run team. 3 running backs with more than 50 yards, 3 yards on the ground, or 3 touchdowns on the ground. And 1 through the air. And then their defense has a pretty highly rated pass rush in that game. 88.9 pass rush grade for Youngstown State's defense yesterday. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you look at it, it's an FCS team, but with the way they graded out on that pass rush, the offensive line isn't, going to be able to just look past this one. You can't look past any game on the schedule, no matter who it is. I know that, Alabama and Georgia both had pretty exciting games yesterday, but they took care of business, and that's what Ohio State's going to have to do for the next 2 weeks. And it starts next week. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to look for things from the offensive line to improve on. They have a good pass rush, but if they've got the dudes to have a good pass rush, I assume their run stopping is not far behind that. So you're going to want to see a lot of things improve, and you're going to want to see Ohio State's offensive line take another step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of names to watch out for. Mitch Davidson, their quarterback, he was 11 for 19, 130 yards with a touchdown through the air. He also had 1 run for 22 yards. So not sure with that if he's actually a running quarterback or if he just had a good scramble there. I would say with one attempt running, it's probably the latter, but we'll see for ourselves. Bryce Oliver was the leading wide receiver, 5 receptions for 65 yards. And then the 3-headed monster at running back, Tyshawn King, had 11 carries, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Cephas Harris III had 7 rushes for 57 yards, and Deshaun Watley had 4 rushes for 58 yards with 1 touchdown. So looks like they're a pretty run heavy offense. At least they were against Valparaiso. I'll be interested to see if they keep it on the ground against Ohio State, or if they end up having to abort that and go to the passing attack if they get down early.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they definitely ran the ball well last week. So, that's going to be another test for Ohio State's defensive line and linebackers. See if they can stop what looks to be a fairly decent run game there in Youngstown State. But, again, we talk about taking steps forward and using games to really work on what you're doing and what your goals are, and scheme wise. So this will be another test for Ohio State to see if they can really key in and stop the run early before they get to some of the talented running backs later on in the season. So just like the offensive line, you want to see the defensive line and linebackers continue to play well.
Yeah, and just looking through the passing chart here, it does not look like they pushed their passes downfield. Most of the passing was done under 10 yards. So I don't think that they're going to have too prolific of a passing attack. But I think that this matchup bodes well for the defense in getting better in the run game, which they were pretty dominant against Indiana, and then also kind of shoring up some of those areas in the secondary and pass rush. Moving along to the defense, they had a couple of standout players. Diamante Diggs, he's a defensive tackle. He had 2 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 sacks yesterday. So I would say that that's part of their 88.9 pass rush grade. Dominant performance there by Diggs. Alex Howard, one of their linebackers, had 7 tackles, 3 QB pressures, resulting in 2 sacks and 1 quarterback hit. So just looking through this, that they like to get after the quarterback. Had four sacks there between those 2 guys. So I would think that this is going to be a good test for the offensive line against some guys who they can probably push around and out strength there as far as the passing attack goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said before, you want to see the offensive line get better, and they're going to have a chance to prove that against a Youngstown State defense that, like you said, kind of likes to get after it and showed that they're not afraid to pin their ears back and put pressure on the quarterback. So, whether it's, I would assume that Kyle will be the guy to start again. But whoever, if they throw Kyle out there, if they throw Devin out there, they're going to have to, have their antennas up and be aware of what's going on around them, and trust in the offensive line to go out there and pave the way for them and be strong, like they were for the most part this week.
Yeah, and looking through here, they only had 7 missed tackles. Usually that shows that is a well-disciplined defense. So you got to be on your toes there. And looking through some of their coverage, guys in coverage, Ty John Jones. Boy, I can't speak today. Safety was targeted 7 times in the pass game. He gave up 4 receptions for 92 yards and had a 57.1% receiving against percentage. So and then Gary Benton Jr., who's a linebacker, had 5 targets, gave up 4 receptions for 8 yards, but 80% receiving against. So those are my 2 kind of guys to look out for, to kind of look as some of the leaders, but also guys who got targeted a lot. So, I think that this passing attack may have a good shot at looking a little better and a little less disjointed against this Youngstown State team. But we'll see here, especially with their pass rush that resulted in 5 total sacks on 11 pressure, on 21 total pressures. So they got home and definitely got the quarterbacks off schedule. And I think that's the key to this week's game going forward is, can Kyle McCord and or Devin Brown, which I would assume that Devin Brown's probably going to play a little more, can they stay on schedule in the pass game, and can the 3-headed monster for Ohio State in the run game dominate? What are your thoughts on this matchup here?
No, I think, we kind of hit it pretty well. You want to see both sides of the ball continue to get better. You want to see Ohio State push the ball downfield a little bit. I don't really feel like they got the opportunity to do so. There were a couple miscues and, a ball that Julian could have caught was a little bit thrown to the wrong side of him. But, you want to see the Buckeyes try to take some shots downfield and, really kind of have a dominant win that a lot of people might have been expecting this week. But I think Ohio State gets it done in a big way. I'm going to say Ohio State 52, Youngstown State 3 in this matchup this week. What do you got?
I think you're going to see something similar to that. A lot of what this is going to key on is how well is Ohio State going to come out and perform, right? I think that an FCS team has little to no chance to beat Ohio State. This isn't Appalachian State back in the day, playing our rival. I don't think that that's the case. I think that you're going to see a game that Ohio State comes out and handles their business. I think you're going to see probably 56-0. I think the defense gets a shutout in their home opener, especially after you saw the way that the defense played against Indiana. I think that they're going to just build upon that performance and shut them out at home in the home opener. So 56-0 there. And I think that you're going to have a little more quarterback controversy coming out of this game than Indiana, because I think that you see Devin Brown and Kyle McCord split more snaps. And in my bold prediction here, Kyle McCord has 3 touchdowns. Devin Brown has 2.
Passing or just total?
Total for both of them, because I think that Devin Brown could get one on the ground. And I wouldn't put it past Kyle McCord to get one on the ground. I mean, he was one cut away from having a ground touchdown this week and eluded pressure. I thought he did a really, really good job. And this was one point we really didn't hit on, but I thought that Kyle McCord did a really good job in going out and eluding that pressure and running when it was time to run on those passing downs and scrambling. He only really had 2 plays where you look at his decision-making when he's trying to scramble away from defenders, where you're like, what the heck happened there? And that was the interception. And then there was one more where he kind of was scrambling out and threw it away, but it was not very good. So I think that you have 2 really good quarterbacks. And I know that that's something that Buckeye Nation does not want to hear. I think they want one guy and keep it going, but I don't think it's as straightforward as we have thought. In going into this week, I think that Kyle McCord did everything that he had to do as the starter this season so far.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll give a bold prediction since you gave one. I think Marv has 2 touchdowns and 150 plus this week. I think we're going to see Marv come back with a vengeance, and he's going to have some fun this weekend in Columbus for the home opener. So 2 touchdowns, 150 plus for Marv this week. Book it. Yeah, so that's what we got to look forward to.
Absolutely, and I can't wait for Saturday. I mean, it's season now, so
We're in it.
Everything is, we're in it. Happy to be in it. That's for sure. Finally, so
Yeah,
let's hope that the season goes as well as we think it will, and move forward. And I think your first test is going to be that Notre Dame game. So let's go take care of business against Youngstown State and Western Kentucky coming up, and get ready to blow the doors off of Notre Dame once and for all.
Yeah, I agree. Ohio State starts their season with a 23-3 victory in Bloomington, Indiana, to start the season 1-0, and also 1-0 in the Big Ten as well. Ohio State's off to a pretty good start, and we'll see that train roll next week back into Columbus for the home opener against Youngstown State. That's a noon game next weekend. So you got any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think as long as we're not on CBS for another boring game, Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson looked like they did not want to be there at all. I think that, if we're going to play on CBS, it's got to be a good matchup, because those guys, they're legends in their own right. But man, was that a snooze fest for them. They looked like they were sitting there going, where's my suite in Bryant-Denny Stadium? Because that's where I want to be. I don't want to be in this awkward press box in Indiana. Nobody wants to be in the press box in Bloomington, Indiana.
Yeah, that was I thought CBS, now while we're on the topic before we get out of here, I thought CBS production of the game was a little weak. I would think that, the first time that they have Ohio State on, in this new deal or whatever, it would look a little bit different, a little bit more effort. Maybe, I don't know. It was awkward looking, but nonetheless, Ohio State starts the season 1-0. Took care of business yesterday at Indiana. As always, guys, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Let us know what you want to see out of us going forward, what you want us to talk about. We would love to incorporate some of that, the viewer, questions, if there are any. Just suggestions are always taken, and we will continue to try and bring you guys some pretty good stuff this season. So we're off and running. We might be back this week, midweek, for a national college football / some NFL talk. But that's where we're going. That's where we're at. Week 1 is out of the way. Ohio State 1-0. Onward to the rest of the season. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Thanks.